Good afternoon, everybody. Pleasure to be back here, fifth QED conference. I'm just going to share a few thoughts, certainly from the non-policy side of things, how we at MasterCard are thinking about the future of payments. And indeed, actually, I have a lot of thematic elements that pick up from what many of the comments Ralph was saying. And I want to cover three areas. First of all, technology and the role of the consumer. The second element I sort of want to discuss is the role of security. We operate in a new and a different world today around cybersecurity. And then lastly, the framework that regulation actually provides us. Above all, we'll talk a lot today about PSD2 and sort of what that's going to do to sort of really enhance sort of the evolution of payments in Europe. But what I'm more excited about is the framework it presents. But before we get there, let me start and share some thoughts on really technology. What's technology doing today? And really, it's technology that's changing the consumer. And, well, the consumer changing technology, the technology changing the consumer. It depends on how you want to see the chicken or the egg elements. Why am I saying this? As consumers, me as a focus group of one, I want to be sort of in an environment where I can do things quicker, easier, cheaper, right? My time is an important commodity to me, and I'll invest in that. And I've been trained to do this. I've been trained to do it by Facebook, wide email when I can do an instant message, PayPal, just one click. And we'll talk about that in a second in terms of the expense of payments. Around, being able to sort of, not carry a laptop when I travel across Europe. I have a little mini computer in my pocket through the mobile phone. These are what consumers are coming to expect. And this is what technology has enabled us to be able to do. Now, if we think about it around payments, more and more of us are doing payments electronically. And Ralph gave a good example of the number of use cases, whether you use a bank transfer, instant credit, using your credit card, your debit card, a P2P payment through an app-based solution like they have in Sweden with Swish. There's many ways in which consumers are opting, citizens are opting in for electronic payments. And that trend's only going to continue. Now, around cards, certainly cards was an innovation in itself, in the 80s and the 90s, right? Because this enabled us not to carry cash, or if I needed cash, I could go to an ATM and pull out the money. So this in itself was a fundamental marvel of its day. However, it's kind of analog, right? It doesn't really represent the digital aspect of where we're going. And certainly as the regulatory framework in Europe allows, it won't necessarily be future-proof for businesses like mine unless we start to sort of see change. And so consumers are already opting, and it's not just the young generation, Ralph, who are sort of moving to mobile payments. I got to tell you, I'm not that young, but I certainly pay my babysitter. We pay the gardener, utilizing either the banking app that I have with my retail bank, or I'm using a solution that is offered by a fintech in order to sort of get that money there. And how we sort of have seen at MasterCard some innovation for the consumer is, today I have my physical piece of plastic, but through the likes of underpinning Apple Pay, Google Pay, I now have a virtual avatar of myself, a token. This is my physical piece of plastic. This is me in the digital space. It still allows me to do the great things that I want to do. The other thing that helps me, the technological innovation, instead of having to type in the 16 digits of the PAN number, verify the back of the card, I can now just do touch and go and payment be done, or an in-app payment with solutions like Masterpass. And so this is sort of where we need to sort of see, what does the consumer want? How do we put the consumer first? And how does innovation help us? Now, absolutely, we believe a use case of cards is certainly one way to make payments. Another way to sort of think about it is real-time payments are becoming more and more important. As a consumer, there's certain transactions I want to do off a line of credit. Others, like my everyday coffee, which I want to come straight out of my banking account, all right? So I want to have the flexibility in order to be able to make those sort of payments. So technology has enabled us to do that today. And certainly, as the PSD2 enshrines it, the era of real-time payments, and more importantly, the fact that technology is now available to empower real-time payments, means as a consumer, I don't need to worry about card, bank accounts. Everything sort of comes together, and then I choose how I want to sort of execute and make my payments. And really, at the end of the day, what we do at MasterCard, whether it's a card-based payments or through our VocaLink acquisition in real-time payments, we want seamless, frictionless, safe transactions. And so that's sort of absolutely core. And so how have we done that? First of all, we've made acquisitions into sort of real-time payment technology. VocaLink would be one. We've really started to focus a lot of our time around artificial intelligence, and as Ralph said, that ability to crunch data. And that'll become more important as I talk about cybersecurity and the role of allowing the consumer to feel that they're making transactions that are safe and secure. We've also sort of spent a lot of time investing in blockchain technology. And we'll talk a lot today about cryptocurrencies and blockchain. And around consumer-based payments, we may be some way off yet from being able to use a cryptocurrency to buy a cup of coffee. Not because it can't work, but largely because there isn't sort of the space at the time. So cybersecurity is something we are very concerned about, and we've invested quite a bit in AI technology across the world in order to make sure we can score and understand exactly what is going on in the crime environment as people's identities are hacked. What can we be doing to ensure that our system on a global basis doesn't just help a bank, but actually helps me as the consumer of one? How am I protected? And that's how we're unleashing the power of our global aspect, right? So yes, there are powers about, there are abilities with a company like MasterCard to bring its global scale to help even the individual of me around elements of cybersecurity. Now, when we talk about cybersecurity, it isn't just about me and protecting me against fraud, but it's also about helping governments, right? Understanding and enforcing KYC and AML policies. How we help European policymakers counteract terrorism. All of these elements come into understanding who I am as a consumer, how my data is protected, and ultimately how I can transact and feel safe in a commercial environment. But likewise, that same data can also be used and understood, by governments in order to protect, not just the payment system, but certainly society itself. Now, finally, when we talk about regulation, so cybersecurity, technology as an innovation for consumers, I actually am very bullish about PSD2. I'm bullish about what the opportunities it provides us. We hear the word disruptive, and yes, PSD2 is designed to be disruptive, unsettle banks as they would, some would see it in terms of a hegemony that they've held. But actually, I like the term you used, Ralph. PSD2 is about speed up. Yes, there's disruption, but actually, market forces are already underway. What I see happening with PSD2 is a speeding up, a framework that's being created, whether it's through the RTS, through the wider piece of the body of the regulation, that's going to enable companies like mine to work with companies where we have problems, where other companies have problems, to close the gap to find a solution. And yes, there will be more competition. FinTech will both be a challenger and a help for institutions like mine, for banks, and even domestic schemes across Europe. So around the RTS and the SCA, we really are very comfortable that this is definitely about building a better consumer trust, right? Consumers can feel that they can trust when their biometric is given, when they interact, on a transaction. This is a very powerful thing for them in the long run. Some of the other benefits is surcharging, which Ralph also mentioned. So we're sort of 17 days into a surcharge-free Europe on a regulated card environment. This is a great move, right? The other thing that is enshrined in the RTS for the consumer is again, reduction of liability on the consumer. And now, while MasterCard is still zero when you use your credit or your debit facilities, this still enhances the overall consumer experience when they engage in payment transactions. And finally, around open banking, as Ralph also alluded, it's not just about financial transactions. It's the value of the data, right? And the data that I, as a consumer, if you're a big Facebook user, you're already consenting for them to sort of understand how you utilize, or what you do on their website, on their platform, that they utilize to sort of generate money, to provide you even further enhanced services. The use cases that we think about data on PSD2, as many have said across the last couple of years, are actually going to be endless. And actually, that's a very exciting place to be. So in closing, what I would say around open banking PSD2 is, let's also be mindful, yes, we have a framework, and we have a set of criteria. We have the EBA, who've provided us a view on the RTS. It's been a great and inclusive environment to engage with. But ultimately, I'm in the business of being pragmatic and delivering solutions to consumers. And for me, the consumer in Estonia needs to have the same experience as the consumer in Hungary. So when we talk about standards, it's one thing to sort of say, hey, you know, use the plug you bought in Paris. Absolutely, that'll work in Hungary. But the other thing is, it might have a diagonal shape that doesn't sort of work, you know, in a Paris in a Paris outlet. So what we need to be doing now is getting a lot more specific on the pragmatic elements of what it's going to mean to have APIs and have that Estonian consumer be able to engage with a fintech partner in Hungary, where the standards are common, and more importantly, that consumer realizes the value of what open banking and PSD2 provides them. Thank you. I look forward to an interesting debate. Thanks, Wolfgang.